On our newscast tonight, South Korea offered to discuss lifting select sanctions imposed on the North if Pyongyang formally apologized for torpedoing the Cheonan warship. But the reclusive regime says it didn't do it, thus no need to say sorry. Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol said the country's economic growth will gain momentum. And in sports, Korea's most celebrated swimmer Park Tae-hwan is temporarily banned from competition after failing a drug test. The ban will end in time for the 2016 Rio Olympics, but it remains to be seen whether Park will be eligible to compete. Stay with us for these and more.
It's Tuesday, March 24th here in Seoul. You're watching Early Edition at 6. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us.
We begin with inter-Korean affairs. It's been nearly 5 years since the deadly torpedo attack on a South Korean warship named Cheonan.
In its latest denial of involvement in the Cheonan incident, Pyongyang called on Seoul to lift sanctions for the sake of better inter-Korean ties. Our Hwang Sung-hee starts us off.
North Korea says it has no apology for the sinking of South Korean warship Cheonan because it had nothing to do with it. Nonsense and never acceptable. That's what the North's National Defense Commission said on Tuesday in response to Seoul's demand for an apology as a precondition to lifting sanctions. Under the so-called May 24th measures, South Korea suspended nearly all inter-Korean economic projects following the torpedo attack 5 years ago. The Unification Ministry dismissed Pyongyang's latest statement, reiterating that the sanctions will not be lifted until North Korea takes responsibility for the attack. All this comes just 2 days ahead of the 5th anniversary of the tragedy that left 46 South Korean sailors dead. It's also an incident seen as a major turning point in inter-Korean relations. In an effort to ease tensions on the Korean peninsula, Seoul repeatedly offered to discuss the possible lifting of sanctions at the negotiating table. But with the latest turn of events, experts say North Korea seems to be seeking an upper hand in inter-Korean relations.
North Korea is sending the message that it will not beg for dialogue with the South. Rather than lifting the May 24th measures, it appears to be after the strategic goal of a shift in Seoul's North Korea policy.
With the joint U.S.-South Korea military drills ending in April, there were hopes for renewed momentum between the two Koreas. But experts say a sudden improvement seems more like wishful thinking. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Well, North Korea's denial of its involvement in the Cheonan sinking comes just a day after a South Korean activist group said it would halt anti-North Korea leaflet launches for good if the regime took responsibility for the Cheonan sinking. Ji Myung-gil has more.
A group of activists led by North Korean defectors have called off plans to fly some 500,000 anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the border this week. But there's a catch. North Korea must apologize for the 2010 sinking of the South Korean Cheonan warship, which killed 46 South Korean sailors.
If they are so afraid of our anti-Pyongyang leaflets, then they should have apologized for the torpedo attack on the Cheonan warship. Then we wouldn't have sent the flyers.
The activists said they will still send the leaflets and copies of the U.S. film The Interview if Pyongyang ignores their demand. North Korea has condemned the flyers as one of the greatest obstacles to overcoming South-North tensions and has not only threatened attacks but also a halt to family reunions and operations at the joint Kaesong industrial complex.
We've seen in previous cases where North Korea stopped work at the Kaesong industrial complex because of anti-Pyongyang leaflets and limited access to the industrial park.
The South Korean government says it does not have legal ground to curb such civic activities, but has asked the group to make wise decisions. The issue has raised safety concerns among residents in border regions. Last October, the two Koreas exchanged gunfire after the North attempted to shoot down balloons carrying similar leaflets. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Now, responding to North Korea's latest claim that it would not be afraid to fire off nuclear weapons if it felt cornered, the United States has urged Pyongyang to abandon its nuclear program. U.S. State Department Deputy Spokesperson Marie Harf said Monday Washington time that the complete, verifiable and irreversible denuclearization of the North is required by multiple UN Security Council resolutions. Harf was responding to an interview given by the North Korean ambassador to Britain, who said Pyongyang would use nuclear weapons if Washington struck with nuclear arms first. She said Washington remains fully prepared to take action against any North Korean threats and also reaffirmed that America's commitment to defend itself and its allies. Now, amid lingering speculations that the U.S. is thinking about deploying its missile defense system to South Korea, more U.S. experts have weighed in on the issue. They say the deployment is, quote, the minimum operational strategy necessary to counter North Korean threats. Our Connie Kim tells us more.
U.S. experts are throwing their support behind the possible deployment to South Korea of the American missile defense system, saying it'll make North Korea think twice before launching provocations. Ben Jackson, who served as a policy advisor at the Office of the U.S. Secretary of Defense, said the potential THAAD deployment wouldn't solve all the security issues, but is a minimum required to provide protection in regards to the North's nuclear and ballistic missile threats. Speaking at a seminar in Washington hosted by Asan Institute for International Policy, Jackson said it is better to have more missile shields as long as the price is right. He added that the optimal outcome would be the integration of South Korean and U.S. systems. Daniel Choy, a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, said THAAD should give China more incentive to work with Washington on North Korea, especially if it is concerned about the implications of the system beyond countering North Korean threats. Choy also stressed that it is unproductive for China to speak of THAAD's purpose given the nature of Pyongyang's nuclear threats. China strongly opposes a possible deployment as THAAD's radar system, which can cover 2,000 kilometers, could be used to monitor parts of mainland China, including Beijing. Following high-level talks last week, a senior Chinese foreign ministry official publicly called on South Korea to consider Beijing's interests and concerns about THAAD. Seoul, however, continues to stress that there have been no official discussions with Washington on the matter. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
A video clip posted on the website of the Japanese embassy in the U.S. is raising some eyebrows in Korea. The video titled "Nation Building in the Post-War Era, Japan as Reliable Partner" says Tokyo created peace and prosperity in Asia, providing economic assistance to Asian countries. Korea was listed as an example of a recipient of Japan's aid, with funds helping to build one of Korea's biggest steel plants and a subway line. While the content of the video is accurate, the timing of the video's release about a month before Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's trip to Washington is causing speculations. There is concern that Abe will not apologize for Japan's past historical wrongdoings during his trip to the White House. And a deadly multiple vehicle pileup in Peru has killed 37 people and left about 70 others injured. Authorities say the crash happened early Monday in north-central Peru after a bus suddenly swerved into oncoming traffic, crashing into two other buses and a truck. Local media is reporting that a delegation from the Worldwide Missionary Movement was on one of the buses. Initial investigations suggest the driver of the bus had fallen asleep at the wheel. While deadly bus accidents are not uncommon in Peru, this is the country's deadliest since October 2013. The world has been joining Singapore in mourning the death of a legendary leader, Lee Kuan-yew, who oversaw 3 decades of development, transforming the port city-state into a global financial hub. China called the 91-year-old an influential statesman and strategist. Indonesia remembered him as an inspirational leader in Asia, and Malaysia noted that Lee's legacy will be carried forward with the future of Singapore. Starting tomorrow, mourners will be able to pay their respects at the Parliament building where Lee's body will lie in state. On Sunday, world leaders including Korea's President Park Geunhye will join Singaporeans in a state funeral. His body will then be cremated in a private ceremony, just as his wife's was 4.5 years ago.
Business partners face a one-day entry ban. 77.
Digging deeper. getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Laah Hyun-kyung and Daniel Choy.
Arirang News. Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
President Park Geunhye says the promises made on public employee pension and labor market reforms must be kept to ensure the success of future generations. At a meeting with her senior secretaries today, the president referred to the upcoming deadlines for the reform plans, stressing that the reforms cannot be carried out without cooperation from Parliament and related parties. She called on the administration to meet the deadlines through dialogue and compromise. And for the first time today, President Park met with her special advisors since appointing them earlier this year. The 7 advisors were named to help the president strengthen external communication in the areas of politics, civil affairs, security, and public relations. Korea's top central banker says the domestic economy will continue to recover, although there are lingering short-term uncertainties. The low key rate is one of the many factors contributing to his prediction. Here's Hwang Ji-hye with the details.
Speaking with economic experts on Tuesday, Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol said he expects the domestic economy to gain momentum. These comments come after the central bank cut its key rate 3 times in the last 8 months, leaving it at a historic low of 1.75%. Those cuts boosted home transactions and led to a sliding Korean won, raising the price competitiveness of local exporters in the global market. The combination of those factors, along with the government's aggressive stimulus measures and low oil prices, have created favorable economic conditions. Dubai crude prices have dropped nearly 50% from a year ago.
The fall in oil prices increases purchasing power. It also pulls down production costs for local manufacturers.
The top central banker, however, cautioned against too much optimism, saying short-term uncertainties still linger over global oil prices and the U.S. Federal Reserve policy. The governor cited Fed Chief Janet Yellen's statement that policy decisions will depend on incoming economic data, indicating that the direction of Korea's key interest rate remains flexible based on fresh information. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Well, back here in Indonesia, the Incheon Free Economic Zone opened up a promotional hall this Tuesday to boost its status as a regional business hub. Also known as the IFEZ, the International Business Zone is part of the government's deregulation drive aimed at attracting multinational companies and foreign investments. Korea is competing with established business hubs in Northeast Asia like Singapore and Hong Kong. The zone aims to strengthen technology-based businesses and the service sector. Experts predict the IFEZ will be one of the biggest beneficiaries of the current government's commitment to deregulation. A study conducted by a local think tank says Korea has a high level of social conflict in comparison to rankings for 24 other OECD member nations. And apparently these divisions are taking a toll on the economy. For more, here's our Kwon So-hwa.
Poor communication between the government and the people. The gap between the rich and the poor, disputes among politicians. These are just a few factors causing social conflict in Korea. The nation's social conflict index was the 5th highest among 24 OECD nations ranked for a study by the Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs. Only Turkey, Greece, Chile, and Italy found it more difficult to deal with social conflict than Korea, but many more countries handle it better than Korea, with Sweden having the least problems. Researchers say the way a country deals with social conflict is reflected in its economic growth, and they stress the importance of cohesion in areas like politics, economy, and social culture. In terms of the figures that deal with factors that trigger social conflict, Korea ranked 4th out of 24 OECD nations. According to the study, a 10% reduction in social conflict can increase the GDP per person by around 1.4%. Due to this correlation between social cohesion and economic progress, experts say the government needs to manage these problems better. Korea's social conflict management index is among the lowest in the OECD, ranking 27th. Denmark was the best in dealing with conflicts, while Mexico was the worst. But data shows there has been improvement, as back in 2000, Korea was nearly rock bottom and has gradually climbed the ranks. Experts say that if the Korean government formulated better policies and regulations and did more to tackle growing inequality, there would be far less conflict and the economy would feel the benefits. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Well, it's less common to see people with tuberculosis in developed countries than developing countries. Well, Korea is considered a developed nation, but it still has one of the highest tuberculosis mortality rates in the OECD. Our Kim Ji-yeon has more on this story.
This patient, identified only by her surname Chung, recently found out that she has tuberculosis. She says she's been coughing constantly since last fall and often experienced shortness of breath.
I've been stressed recently due to problems at home. I couldn't eat very well.
Chung is one of the 35,000 patients who were recently diagnosed with tuberculosis in Korea. The country sees nearly 8 times the number of TB cases compared to the OECD average. Korea has one of the highest fatality rates from the disease among member countries. More than 2,200 patients died in 2013 alone. Doctors say it's important to wash our hands thoroughly and detect tuberculosis in its early stages. They advise getting a medical checkup if coughing lasts for more than 2 weeks.
Patients delaying treatment are highly likely to suffer from hemoptysis or coughing up blood. Tuberculosis patients that enter the intensive care unit from cases like these, the mortality rate is close to 100%.
In response, the Ministry of Health and Welfare is increasing efforts to eradicate the disease. It's dispatching around 400 medical personnel to community medical centers across the country so that each tuberculosis patient can get more intensive attention. The ministry is also cutting the cost of treatment. Starting in 2016, tuberculosis patients won't have to pay a cent for medical help for the disease. Overall, the ministry expects to reduce the number of TB patients by half by 2020. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
In other news, trying to remove water from windows or glasses without leaving smears or smudges can be a real hassle sometimes. But thanks to a local research institute, we may no longer have to deal with that hassle. Lee Ju-yeol has more.
Driving in the rain can be dangerous, especially when you can't clear your windshield properly. A research team at the Korea Institute of Science and Technology has developed a solution to that problem, and they took a few cues from nature. When you look at a flower petal, water rolls right off it. So the scientists tried to emulate that action by adding ultra-microscopic bumps to the surface of the glass.
We specifically applied nanotechnology because we wanted water to bounce off the glass.
With the help of the nano bumps, the glass stays waterproof, fog-free, and dust-free. This latest research has been published in the online journal Scientific Reports, and the lead researcher says demand for this weather-resistant glass is high. It can be applied to three-dimensional curved surfaces, as well as car windows, cameras, or eyewear. Until now, the manufacturing process to incorporate nanotechnology was very complicated, but domestic researchers simplified it and used water instead of chemicals.
The manufacturing process is simple and eco-friendly. If we can continue making them in large amounts, I think we can make them available to consumers in 2 to 3 years' time.
Until then, stay dry and drive safe. Lee Ju-yeol, Arirang News.
Theater performances, the good ones can make us laugh or cry, sometimes both, but they can also transport us back in time. Our Im Yoon-hee tells us about a pair of plays that explore the wounds of the Korean War.
A peaceful Hanok home sits at the center of this stage. The home belongs to an elderly couple who got married in the midst of the Korean War. But now they find themselves facing a new ordeal. Their son has gone missing, and their neighborhood has been plagued by a deadly disease. The couple are the last ones left in an abandoned village and must come to terms with leaving their home.
비워줄 땐 비워주더라도 돌아가야지.
The play, Snow in March, tells a moving story of an elderly couple closing the door to a chapter in their lives.
Twilight usually gathers on one side, but on the other side, you can see the new morning arrive. In this production, similarly, you can see both creation and extinction.
The second play takes place while the dust from the Korean War was still settling. The award-winning Kyung-suk's father, is helmed by notable director Park Geunhye. The father in the play abandoned his family at the outbreak of the war, trying to save himself. And while the mother feels both love and hate for her husband, their intelligent daughter shoulders the family's responsibilities. This production is about love and forgiveness in the aftermath of war. Im Yoon-hee, Arirang News.
And moving on to sports, one of Korea's most popular Olympic medalists, Park Tae-hwan, has received an 18-month ban for testing positive for a drug test.
Well, he has been through a lot of ups and downs, but unfortunately, the ban casts a long shadow of doubt over whether the former Olympic champion will ever swim competitively again. Our SJ Lee reports.
Korea's Marine boy Park Tae-hwan, who tested positive for testosterone last fall, was hit with an 18-month ban on Monday, following a short hearing at the Switzerland headquarters of the world swimming body, FINA. The ban will remain effective until March 2016. In theory, that means Park could still take part in the 2016 Rio Olympics, but he will certainly miss the 2015 World Championships in Russia this summer. There have been concerns Park would be hit with the maximum 24-month ban, which would have definitely counted him out of Rio. Park maintains that he never knowingly received shots that contained any banned substance. The verdict means all of the swimmer's results after the positive dope test have been declared void, and he will have to give back the 6 medals he won at last year's Asian Games in Korea's western port city of Incheon. Park, with his good looks and clean-cut image, has been a widely popular sports star and product endorser in Korea and elsewhere in Asia, and his swimming record prior to this scandal speaks for itself. On top of his many Asian Games titles, Park won a gold medal in the 400-meter freestyle and silver in the 200-meter freestyle at the Beijing Olympics in 2008. He also snagged 2 silvers at the 2012 London Olympics and golds at the 2007 and 2011 World Championships. So while this ban is a major setback and tarnishes his legacy, his legion of fans will hope he can stay focused and make a triumphant comeback at the Rio Olympics. SJ Lee, Arirang News.
Dry weather continues to plague the peninsula.
Well, that's perhaps why we're getting more reports of fire. For details, let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle.
Good evening, guys. Dry weather advisories and warnings are in effect across most parts of the country. Now, in fact, the dryness increased in some areas surrounding the capital and is expected to get worse. And in the areas with warnings, effective humidity stands at 25%, while advisory levels are at 35%. And according to the fire hazard assessment, there are high chances of fire when humidity dips below 50%. So let's all be careful and watch out for fires. Now, it would be nice to get some rain to relieve the dry weather, but looking at this week's forecast, not likely until Sunday, when a bout of spring showers will fall here in the capital as well for Gangwon province. Now, tomorrow there will be less wind than today, so we are expecting milder conditions. Now, with that in mind, let's have a look at the readings for tomorrow. So we'll start off the Wednesday morning at 1 and gets up to 15 degrees. Meanwhile, the southern regions such as Daegu and Busan will top to 15 and 13 degrees. Moving over to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 13, Dokdo hits 9, while Nangkeugang dips to 1. That's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thanks for that, Michelle. That's the end of this edition of our newscast. Have a great start to your day if you're tuning in from different time zones. This has been Daniel Choy.
And I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. Have a good evening if you're in Korea. See you again tomorrow. Goodbye for now.